Hi, this is Megha Joshi, the host of the Boardroom Zen podcast. This show is created for the ambitious business leaders. Are you someone wanting to play big? Want to possess a strong brand and executive presence that makes you belong in every room you walk into? And all of this without putting your personal life on hold? If the answer to those questions is yes, then you are in the right place. In this show, I sit down with best-in-class leaders to distill their wisdom while sharing what helped me stand out as a Fortune 100 executive. So let's get started. Let's get into the topic for today, personal branding for leaders. And why do I talk about this topic? Number one, this topic is so imperative to any leader's success, but sadly, we don't talk about it enough in the boardrooms or in the classrooms. We just talk about branding in the context of a physical product or service, but don't talk about branding in the context of a leader, of a human being, which is so imperative to their success. And so today we are going to unpack all of that. We're going to dig into the 3 Ps. Yes, the 3 Ps of personal branding. And I'm not going to expose the P's just yet. In just a few minutes, you'll get to know what it is. So hang on there and sit tight. But I will share that we're going to look at some of the most iconic brands and see what they do well. What are those 3 P's? And we're going to translate that into how we as corporate leaders can apply those 3 P's to be more successful, to have an impeccable presence and brand that we all need to have to be successful, to be uber successful. So I'm going to open up with one simple question for you. And the question is, when you think about any iconic brand that speaks to you, that you adore and love, what is that brand? So for me, I'll go first. The brands that resonate with me, if you ask me, are Apple. They would be Mercedes, and so on. There's a whole slew of brands that I have this great regard for. And so today we're going to take these brands and we're going to figure out what do they do really, really well. All right? Can you guess what is the one thing, what is that one common thread that all these brands do incredibly well? What are they really doing here? I would say the common thread that connects all of these top-notch brands is the 3 Ps of personal branding. They're all exceptional at those 3 Ps. And here you go. Here are the 3 Ps that we're going to dive into today. The first P is the P of product. The second P is packaging. And then the third P is promotion. And we're going to dive into all these 3 Ps, if you will, and see how we can leverage the power of these Ps to fuel our personal brand as a leader. And yes, customer experience at its best, that's huge for any epic brand. And so we're going to get into all of that. But before we dig in deeper, who loves a good story or a good movie? I'm going to raise my hand and say, I do. I love a good story because it speaks to me. So why don't we do this? Instead of making this LinkedIn presentation monotonous and going through some slide deck and whatnot, let's do this. Let's go through a story, a compelling story. So here's the movie. There's one movie that I watched this past weekend. You might have heard of it or seen it. It's called Air. This movie is based on a particular time in the life of the brand Nike, and it features Matt Damon in this movie. As you all know, Nike today is an exceptional brand. In fact, some of you may not know, but last year, Nike was named as one of the most valuable companies in the whole world in the clothing space. And that's huge. But by the way, back in the 1980s, that was not the case. Nike was struggling with their sales. Specifically, their basketball shoe division was struggling. They just couldn't get enough sales out of the door. And the team was working hard and doing whatever they could to keep the lights on, but the other top-notch players like Adidas or Reebok or Converse were giving Nike a run for their money, and they were crushing the market. And so back in the 1980s, the CEO of Nike, Phil Knight, and his team, one of the leaders within his team that's played by Matt Damon, they come together and they make a big bet. And this bet was the launch of a specific shoe line called Air Jordan. And this, as you can tell from the name, Air Jordan was a brand new shoe line that was introduced by Nike in the name of Michael Jordan, who was a rising star at that time in the basketball space. And so they were able to sign Michael Jordan after really long-winded round of negotiations and haggling. And finally, they got Michael Jordan on board and they launched this Air Jordan brand. And per sales projections, Nike was estimating they're going to sell about $3 million worth of inventory in the next 4 years. You know how much they actually sold? Well, they sold over $126 million worth of inventory in just 1 year. So they crushed it by any stretch of imagination. And so this is an interesting movie, but the piece that I pulled out of this movie was Nike did what they did because they were tapping into the power of the 3 Ps, the product, the packaging, and the promotion. And we're going to dive into each of those 3 Ps, and I'm going to show you how we can translate the success that Nike had in the product space into our own leadership realm, how we can have an impeccable brand that stands on its feet, that people want to associate with as a leader. So let's go. Let's start with the very first P of product. What do we mean by product? We mean that the actual product needs to be functional. It needs to serve a purpose. It needs to have some value to it. So in this story of Nike, this product, Air Jordan, the shoe line that Nike came up with, it was an exceptional product. It was made of high quality materials. It was way more durable than any other shoe brand on the market that was available, and it offered incredible comfort and support to its customers. Anybody that wore it loved it. And so this brand, clearly, this product was offering impeccable value in itself as a product. And so as we take that Nike product and apply it to our own leadership space, we all need to deeply think about who are we? What do we represent? What are our innate talents and skills that we do really, really well? And that comes with self-awareness, right? That comes with pausing and saying, what do I do really well? What can I do in my sleep? What do I do naturally? What do people compliment me on? Because that's where the rubber hits the road and that's where you start shining. And so when I talk about an exceptional product in the context of us as a leader, I am not talking about the embellished degrees we have, the MBAs in the masters and the PhD, none of that. And I'm not talking about titles, directors, VPs, senior vice presidents, C-suite, none of that. Take away that fluff and talk about who are you at your core. Do you know what you do really, really well? What are your talents? And that's what we mean by product. And so when you think about your brand, you have to be very intentional about who you are as a product and the value you bring to the marketplace. And it comes with time and intention, but it can. And and at the heart of it really is self-awareness and being aware of ourselves. So that is the very first P. And it's so powerful and it is so foundational to our presence as a leader. Otherwise, everything else is just fluff if we cannot deliver, if we cannot be that impeccable product. So why don't we switch gears to the second P of branding, which is packaging? So going back to the Nike story, packaging, in my opinion, looking at something from 2 dimensions. One is, what is the story of this product, right? And second is, does this product stand out from a whole slew and portfolio of other products? How is this memorable? Is this sticky, right? And so what Nike did so well was they created the shoe line around Michael Jordan and his his brilliance, his genius. This shoe line was designed around him and his capabilities. And so there was a story to this shoe. It wasn't just any shoe on the market or on the shelf. This really embodied the spirit of Michael Jordan and tapped into his fan base. And so there was a story there. And then how this shoe line differentiated itself was through its design. If you look at this particular shoe line, you will see that Nike had a very specific red and black color pattern embedded in the shoe, which was not typical at that time. And in fact, the National Basketball Association, NBA, did not even approve of its players wearing that shoe. But guess what Michael Jordan and Nike did? They made Michael Jordan step into the court every single time wearing this shoe that defied the NBA rules. And so with that, every time he stepped on the court, he was penalized and he had to pay a penalty of $5,000, which Nike obviously funded. But what it gave Nike was a brand that stood out, that was exceptional, that wasn't afraid to sometimes even stand out and maybe even defy the norms to its advantage. And so with that, Nike was able to differentiate its own packaging. There was a story and it stood out. The product stood out in itself. And so when we take that concept and we put it in the leadership realm, as a leader, how can we package ourselves better? I would say we should look at it from two different angles. The first angle is, what is our story? Who are we? And yes, we have an impeccable product and we know the talents and capabilities we have, but what is our story? What is our narrative? What are people hearing about us? What are people talking? And so we have to manage our story in the space. And I'll talk about what are those two spaces. And then the second piece is, how do we stand out? What differentiates us? What makes us memorable and sticky? And this is a topic that is so deep, I could talk for hours, but for today's context, I'm just going to stay on the surface for a little bit and talk about our presence and our packaging in two spaces. The first space is the digital space. In no other time in history has our digital presence been more important. And so as a leader, it is so important for us to manage our presence out there in the digital world. We're leaving footprints everywhere we go, every website we check in, on our social media platforms, on our LinkedIn, right? What story is our LinkedIn profile telling? Do we even have a professional headshot? Are we just throwing a bunch of jargons and titles and degrees? If that's the case, that's not a powerful story. That's not the real packaging. So we have to work at it. And the same is true for your resume. Is your resume telling a story, or is it going to look like the 10,000 other resumes on that hiring manager's desk? What makes you stand out? So we got to think about our digital presence in every which way. And then the second presence that we have to think about is our live presence. When we are engaging with people, when we are in events and meetings and conferences, having conversations with our team, running team meetings or attending one, we have to manage our presence. Because at the end of the day, as Maya Angelou said in her fabulous quote, one of my favorites, by the way, people do not remember what you said or what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel. So by virtue of your live presence, how are you making others feel? Are you making them feel included or excluded? Are you making them feel irrelevant or valuable? That is all our presence. And we can call it executive presence, but it all rolls up under the package of packaging, right? The second P that we learned about. And so we have to be very intentional about it. And with that, I will say you definitely don't want to be the best kept secret. You want to put yourself out there and let your genius, let your brand get out. And so let's switch gears to the third P of branding. You know what the third P is? It's promotion. It's the power of promotion. And you know who the biggest promoter is for us as a leader? It's us. We have to self-promote ourselves. But before that, let's go back to the Nike story for just a second. Now, this Air Jordan brand that Nike had launched, they had signed Michael Jordan as the brand ambassador. But you know what? He was not the biggest promoter of this brand. The biggest promoters of the brand were the customers that were experiencing the genius of this product. They were the real deal. And so, as the customers were buying this shoe, they were experiencing it and they were wowed by it and they were transforming by virtue of the incredible experience they were having with the shoe. They were the biggest brand promoter. They were going out and telling their friends and families and other people how exceptional this product was. And so, if we take that concept that Nike had of promotion and apply that into the leadership branding realm, I will say that when we think about our own promoters, we have to work at it. As I said, the very first promoter we have is ourselves. And we have to intentionally communicate who we are, what our story is. Because you know what? If we don't tell that story, nobody else will in the way we want it. So we want to control the narrative and we want to tell the story in the way we want to. And with that, you also want to be very intentional about who is willing to bet on you and who is willing to promote you. And mind you, when I say promote you, I don't just mean people that are above you in the corporate totem pole. I'm talking about people that may be below you, your subordinates, your team, or people that don't even report to you, but they engage with you. They are your promoters. They're going to be talking about your leadership brand. And then think about your peers. They are also your brand promoters or not, or they could be detractors. So what are you doing to manage your brand and promote it across all different levels of the organization, including the people above you? And don't always just look at the next layer up in the leadership hierarchy, not just your boss, but you have to manage people way above in that totem pole because you don't know who's going to be helping make the case for you as a leader and who's going to be saying in those boardrooms, then guess what? This guy or this girl is ready for their next big move. And why don't we send them to Midwest to run this division? You got to be very intentional about who's promoting you. And I will say that just by having a strong product and a strong packaging, that is not enough for the third P to work. You have to be intentional about your promotion. You have to actively build relationships and not build transactional relationships, but have real, meaningful, deep relationships across the organization, beyond the organization. You have to build your promoters and your following across the board. And I would say even outside your organization, because you don't know who is talking about you and how are they promoting you. And there is a lot of power in promotion. I personally have seen the power of promotion work wonders for me as a corporate leader. And so think about it and be intentional, actively network, and don't always be going into those networking conversations with a desire to get something out of it. It is a two-way street. You have to support others. You have to be promoters of others. You have to help them. You have to engage with people in real, meaningful ways. And that's the right way to do it. And so with that, you got a sneak peek into the 3 Ps of personal branding, which were product, packaging, and promotion. And when you bring these 3 Ps together, there is real meaningful power to it. That's where the rubber hits the road and great things start to unpack. And I've seen that happen. In fact, I'll share with you a brief client experience I had. So one of my recent clients, without disclosing his name, but he is a rising star in the healthcare space. He was a director back when we started to work together. And at that time, he was somewhat struggling. He was great at many things, but he was doing too much. He was spreading himself thin, and he wasn't seeing the traction that he wanted in his corporate trajectory. And so as we worked together and heightened this leader's self-awareness, what became very clear from a personal branding space is this. So the first P of product that this client unpacked was that he was exceptional when it came to firefighting and putting out fires in the corporate ecosystem. And he was also really good at problem solving. He could solve complex problems that were at the intersection of technology and business. That's what he did really, really well. This wasn't something that he was very aware of in the beginning. But over time, as his awareness heightened and he figured out what he did really well, he started to double down on that. He started to go after that skill and apply that in every which way across a variety of projects. And then as we moved on to the second P of packaging, he also made sure that he was telling the same consistent story of who he was. And he made sure that he was standing out from the pack by virtue of sharing how he was different and unique and special in what he had. And his superpower was really to break down the complex into simple. And that's what he doubled down on. And that's what he said when he was in conversations with people. He introduced himself and said, hey, I know how to break the complex into simple. And he didn't just say it, he did it. He took on many of the most complex projects in the organization and broke down barriers, and people came together. Typically, people that wouldn't work together, they would come together in the room and help move the conversation forward because he was able to translate the complex into simple. And that was his superpower. And that's how people started to get to know him. And in fact, over time, he started to be called as the Red Adair of the company. He was the one that was called on to put off fires, to solve complex problems. And so as he started to think about his promotion and what kind of relationships he was building, he went about and started to introduce himself to department leaders and put himself out there, have meaningful dialogue and figure out where the synergies are and where he could help these other divisional leaders do better. And as his brand got out, you know who got the call from the CIO when he was faced with one of the most complex projects of all times and the most pressing ones? This leader. This leader got those calls. And with time, he delivered. It wasn't just packaging and promotion. He had something very special to give, and the world tapped into that. And with that, within the first 7 months, this leader was able to take his brand from being the jack of all trades to being somebody that was special and known for something specific, which was breaking the complex into simple, which was problem solving and firefighting. And so with that, what he did to his brand was stellar, and what this brand did to his corporate trajectory was again phenomenal. He was promoted to the next level with a 35% increase in his total compensation. And with that, he was able to leverage the power of the 3 Ps to elevate himself, to elevate his leadership brand to the next level. And so I encourage you to think about the 3 Ps as you go about your day and start to think about who are you? What is your product? What is your packaging? And who is promoting you? And how are you promoting yourself across all different platforms? And I will also share that if any of you is interested in learning more on how to elevate your brand, reach out to me. Send me a personal message or go to boardroomzen.com and book a chat with me, and I'd be happy to explore possibilities and show you what's possible, the art of the possible. And this is exactly what we do really well at Boardroom Zen. We bring together these pieces of the puzzle for our leaders, things that may be holding these leaders back because sometimes they don't see it. They don't see the big picture, but we do, and we are here to support you. I hope you found something of value in this conversation today. Drop in any feedback or thoughts you have or questions you have that I haven't been able to address, and I'd be more than happy to get back to you or share anything else you have that I need to know. So with that, thank you for your presence, and I just want to say more success and power to each one of you, and I will see you soon. There is no better time than now to stop playing small and tap into your zone of genius. With a Boardroom Zen executive coach by your side, experience the game-changing transformation, both internally and externally. Find out more on boardroomzen.com. And thank you for listening to my show. It means so much to me. I'd love for you to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite listening platform. More power to you, and hope to see you soon.